Alright, Paula. So
Thank you.
this is for you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is Liam and this is Bailey.
Hi, Bailey.
Just sitting on all of them.
Hi. Oh, well, hey.
Were these made? You make it?
We made these this morning, yes.
You made the biscuits this
We
morning?
made them,
Oh, they're not store-bought. Made this morning, excellent.
they're fresh off the tray, aren't they, Leo? Yes, much flowery faces.
Oh, we should have filmed that.
That I've managed to convince some of our veterans to come along who have been in the military to have a talk to you today.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Mark Wright and we are here at Paeroa RSA, and I've been asked to come along and talk a little bit about Anzac Day. We're filming a video documentary to play this Anzac Day on behalf of the Hauraki District Council. What years did you serve in the New Zealand Army?
I joined the Army in 1964 and finished in 1974, the day before Anzac Day.
Wow. And where around the world did the Army take you?
Right through New Zealand and to Singapore and Malaya.
Singapore and Malaya. So, as a serviceman, or returned serviceman, obviously you're far too young to have served in the First World War or the Second World War. What does Anzac Day mean to you?
Anzac Day is very important. My father served in the Second World War. My grandfather served in the First World War. And because I joined the military, it became very important to me. More so when I heard in 1965 that one of my best friends had been killed by standing on a landmine in Vietnam. And his name was Don Benjamin. And every Anzac Day I get pretty shitty work at it, just because of that.
Thank you. So, how relevant do you think Anzac Day is to young people in New Zealand today?
It's relevant to young people for two reasons. One, it's part of your history. And two, it's a part of respect for people that have served and who are still serving.
Thank you. Richard, Mr. Richard Gabriel, Richard, you were in the English Navy.
Yeah, 57.
From 1950 to 1957.
Yeah.
And what class of ship were you on, primarily?
Destroyers all the time in the Navy.
The whole time on the destroyers.
Yes.
Excellent. And I believe that you have brought today to show the students a model
Yes.
of one of your ships you served on.
Correct.
And would you like to show them that and tell us that this is hand built by yourself?
That's right.
Excellent.
Wow.
All right. So you didn't go and buy this down at the toy shop. This is all handcrafted.
Yeah.
All right. So and what was your job?
In the communication section as a telegraphist.
Can you explain to the beam what a telegraphist is? Because they didn't have cell phones back then.
Yeah. In those days, there were no satellites, no GPS. Nothing, I'm talking about 1950s now. Available. So communications relied on three separate parts of the ship. One by signal lights, when you can see what you're aiming for. One by flags, which come off the halyard down here.
So you would run up flags and
Yeah.
you can send signals
Yes.
because they mean different things or different letters. So you can actually send a message by displaying a sequence of flags.
Yeah, and the other one was for far distances was radio, and the telegraphist is a person that can send Morse at high speed for sustained periods. In my case, 30 words a minute.
And that's Morse code.
Yeah.
So they didn't text, they didn't have Instagram or Facebook. They basically had to tap out a Morse code, and again, it spelled out words so that they could send messages.
Now, a destroyer is a remarkable ship. It's unlike any other in the Navy. They're very small, about 3,000 tons, half the size of a Cook Strait ferry. But they will take on anything and everything that floats. Even 40,000 ton battleships will turn away from this particular model of ship. The main reason for that is torpedoes, which are situated here, submarines, for which it was mainly built for, was to search out and destroy submarines. Used to do that with a system of depth charges and ASDIC to find out where this thing was under the water. Very successful. She had very good anti-aircraft facilities in Beaufort and fore and aft, which could handle most things, and these were for fighting other ships or bombarding a coast which was out of sight, basically. Like I said, a mean vessel. They were capable of 36 knots, which is 60 miles per hour. Beg your pardon, kilometers per hour. So if you've travelled in a car going 60 down the road, you know how fast this thing can move. For this reason, she's very hard to hit because she zigzag. And any big ships trying to hit them usually missed. Now, one thing about the Navy, I see there's a lot of girls here today. There are some very, very good opportunities for you in the Navy. There are high-ranking female officers in the Navy. And for the boys, similarly, on your own ability, you can grow to be whatever you want. And if you want it bad enough, you'll get it. And the Navy will give you the finest training available, of the most modern equipment available, in just about every trade you can think of.
So there is Richard basically doing a recruitment drive for the Royal New Zealand Navy. Thank you very much. How about a round of applause for his wife? Yeah. I take it that's thousands of hours goes into building, hand building something like that.
Oh, quite a lot.
Well,
Because I made plenty of mistakes. I had to do a lot by memory.
yeah.
Very fiddly, and I've got short, fat fingers.
Well, it's a fine piece of work, I have to say.
A lot. Yeah. Even the centre tall mast and the funnel, that took nearly 200 hours. 200 hours. Yeah.
All right. Last but by no means least, Danny. Danny, you were in the New Zealand Army. In what years did you serve?
I served 1963 to 1971.
And did you see active service?
I saw active service over in Malaysia when the Indonesian paratroopers came over. Actually, we were supposed to go on holiday, 4 days holiday, but we never got out that front gate to get back. And we also patrolled the Thai-Malaysian border, and then I did 2 tours, one with our own battalion, over to Borneo. Then 300 of us had to stay behind to train the new battalion coming in. And we went over there, and that's when I saw my second tour over there. Came back home and joined Dunn. They didn't like us because we topped the, what you do is you do a breakdown from the top, the command, right down to the gun line. And 3 volunteers, we topped the course. So they posted us to Outlaw Prison Camp to look after the blokes up there. And we didn't like it, so we asked for a transfer through our head of corps infantry, where we got back to Phillip. From there, we so to speak about 2 weeks to go back overseas, and from there we went to Vietnam.
So you saw active service in Vietnam?
Yeah.
Active service means basically you're fighting, you're at war. So when I asked him, did he see active service, he's just named 3 theatres of war, Malaya, Borneo and Vietnam, that he saw active service and was fighting. So Danny, what does Anzac Day mean to you?
It means a lot because I had 2 uncles, no, mum's brother. They went over in the Second World War, and they were lucky to come home after the war, and I had a lot of respect for them. I went to one of the funerals of my uncles, and even today, I still remember all our guys that were lost in Vietnam, and also back home here, whereas they had what they call Agent Orange, and they had these planes going across while we were in the helicopters. We said, oh God, they must be spraying mosquitoes. Little did we know it was a poisonous living stuff they were dropping down on the ground. Kills everything.
It was defoliant, wasn't it? Was
yeah, defoliant.
To kill the bush. Therefore, how do you believe Anzac Day is relevant to young New Zealanders today?
Well, to me, it means that's passing on our knowledge to the young ones of what happened overseas, and also you might have fathers, grandfathers that served over in the First and Second World War, and the wars after that. Me, it's time for Anzac. We all get together and we start talking about the war and that, what we've been through. That's about all I can say.
Thank you. So, to you, it's about what I suggest the heritage of young New Zealanders. There is the possibility that their fathers and forefathers were involved in conflict for the defence of New Zealand, and so, as someone great once said, in order to know where you are going, you must first know where you have been. Thank you. If you'd like to give the gentleman a round of applause for coming today. Thank you for your time. I have a particular interest in the Gallipoli campaign and the origins of Anzac Day. In 2014, I was very privileged to travel to Gallipoli and front a documentary for Television New Zealand called Our Sons of Gallipoli. So I've been there and stood on that hallowed ground. So I'll ask some questions first of all. You don't have to put your hand up, just yell out the answer. Does anyone know what ANZAC stands for? Go.
Australian New Zealand Army Corps.
Yes, Australian New Zealand Army Corps. All right. Why do we celebrate Anzac Day on the 25th of April? Say that again? Yes, it was that's the actual day of the landing. That's the day that the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps landed on the beaches of the Gallipoli Peninsula. Now, peninsula is only about 25 kilometres long. That's pretty much the distance between Paeroa and Ngatea. And where they landed, which is now being called Anzac Cove, if you took a direct line from Anzac Cove across the peninsula, it was only about 8 kilometres wide at that point. And it would take normally a person about an hour and 20 minutes to walk that distance if it was flat. However, it was terrible terrain, it was mountainous and slopes, and the Allied troops spent from April 1915 until about the 20th of December 1915 on that peninsula, and they never got to cross it. They never got to achieve their objective, was to capture the Straits of the Dardanelles, which is a waterway coming from Turkey, actually coming from the Black Sea, and opens up into the Mediterranean. New Zealand troops didn't come ashore until after 10 in the morning, so they were in broad daylight, and they were being fired upon from the heights that had been occupied by Turkish troops. 3,000 New Zealand troops landed on that day. By nightfall on the 25th, over 700 New Zealand soldiers were lying either wounded or dead. If I read out a name and it's on your piece of paper, stand up. Nurse Marion Brown, Nurse Isabel Clark, Nurse Catherine Fox, Nurse Mary Gorman, Nurse Nonna Hilliard, Nurse Helena Isdale, Nurse Mabel Jameson, Nurse Mary Ray, Nurse Lorna Rattray, and Staff Nurse Margaret Rogers. You all standing up? War is a bit like a lottery. I gave out about 20 nurses' names. The ones that are standing. You boarded a ship in Alexandria, Egypt, basically, and you were sailing in that ship to go to Gallipoli to attend to wounded soldiers. You're all New Zealand nurses. Unfortunately, on the night that you travelled, your ship was torpedoed by a German submarine, and you were all lost at sea. So in case you were thinking that the First World War only affected the male population of New Zealand, we lost 10 nurses on that one occasion. Thank you. You can sit down. The other names I gave out. Stand up if I read out your name. Private Phillip Manu Blake. Phillip Manu Blake was in the Wellington Battalion and went up with Colonel Malone up Chunnock Bear. He was a rifleman. In the afternoon of the first day, a good mate of his was wounded, and he volunteered to carry his mate on his back down this hill to a dressing station on the beach. Now, there was no need for him really to return. He could have just sat on the beach and made sure that his mate was attended to, but he didn't. Phillip Manu Blake climbed back up Chunnock Bear, and later that afternoon, a Turkish bullet took the top of his head clean off, and he was dead before he hit the ground. Thank you. Private John Dunn. Private John Dunn. Private Dunn was a New Zealand rifleman on Gallipoli, and he was charged with desertion because he fell asleep on guard duty. British generals tried him, court-martialed him, and he was sentenced to death by firing squad. However, his commanding officer put forward mitigating circumstances at his trial, and it was discovered that he had supposed to have been relieved, that means replaced, by another soldier 5 hours beforehand. Because he'd been standing watch for 5 hours longer than he should have, he fell asleep. So his sentence was commuted, which means he was no longer going to be shot by firing squad. He was returned to his unit, which was the Wellingtons, and he went up Chunuk Bair with Phillip Manu Blake. He also died on the 8th of August, 1915. Corporal Cyril Bassett. Corporal Cyril Bassett was a signaller. A signaller, like a telegraphist, basically, worked in communications. Now, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have radios in those days. Cyril Bassett ran a phone line up Chunuk Bair 3 times that day because it kept on getting broken by shell fire. And he enabled communications between the top of Chunuk Bair, the trenches that were now occupied by New Zealand troops, and headquarters down on the beach. Corporal Cyril Bassett is the only New Zealander to be awarded a VC in the Gallipoli campaign. Now, the VC is the Victoria Cross, and you'll know Uliapiata up here wears that deep crimson ribbon of the Victoria Cross. It's the highest military honour in the army to this day. He survived World War I. Second Lieutenant Thomas Hummy Grace. He was a graduate of Wellington College, very good rugby player, played rugby for the New Zealand Māori, great cricket player. Fortunately, he too was killed on Chunuk Bair on the 8th of August 1915. Lieutenant Colonel William Malone. This is Lieutenant Colonel William Malone. He was the highest ranking officer in charge of the Wellington Battalion that assaulted Chunuk Bair, the mountain. He had a reputation of leading New Zealand troops from the front. He never asked anything of his men that he wasn't prepared to do himself, so he led the assault up Chunuk Bair himself, and they captured the Turkish trenches on the top of the hill. They were supposed to be relieved by 20,000 fresh British troops that were landed at a bay further down the peninsula, but the British troops didn't move inland. They sat there, they pitched tents, they had cups of tea, and they played football. So the Wellingtons defended the tops of Chunuk Bair for 2 days. 800 men went up that hill that day. 2 days later, when they were finally relieved by 2 British brigades, 71 men walked off it. The rest of them are still there. They lie to this day on the slopes of Chunuk Bair. Colonel Malone was killed and his body never recovered. If you have any questions, I brought this along today to try and take you back to that period so you can understand. This is my wireless speaker. This is 1914 version of Spotify. Because in those days, they didn't have radios or anything electric like a record player. This is basically a spring wound up, and this is a record, and it's not vinyl, it's basically Bakelite. Now, there is nothing electric about this. If you wanted to listen to music in those days and you didn't have a band playing, that is just a sharpened piece of steel, a needle. And it goes over grooves in this and it creates sound.
There's a little bit of Irish in everybody's heart, sure no matter what your name is, you'll agree.
I would suggest that if you can, please attend an Anzac Day service to honour the memory of the servicemen and women of this country who have stood in harm's way on your behalf. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you on behalf of Paeroa College for having us today.